brother?
Good, good. Just getting back into fall training last couple weeks. It's exciting.
When do you decide to start running your dogs? Like, what is the thing that you see that says, okay, now I'm going to start training in earnest?
Well, the hope is always by September, and we try to go if it's 50 degrees or cooler, or a little bit warmer and raining and windy, somewhere around there.
Yeah, it's pretty much. I try to keep to the rule of the 40s, as long as it's not over 50 degrees. Or I'm going to be breaking the below 50-degree rule maybe this year a little bit, but we'll find out later. But man, it's good to have you on. I think we got to meet in person. We were friends on social media, but we got to meet in person. Was it 2023 Willow, the last Willow race?
Yeah, the last Willow 300.
Yeah, we were sitting across the room, and Hugh Neff was over there, and he's a, always been a real friendly guy on social media and always offering me a lot of advice as I was starting to transition from a recreational to a racing team. So I went over to say hi to him, and he introduced us. And looks like you've got a nice little family started there too.
Yeah, the kids are getting big, man. My daughter just started kindergarten this last couple weeks, and yeah, it's been interesting. But I had been following your story a little bit, just kind of through social media, and um, was c- kind of seemed like for a time we were kind of on the same timeline of like qualifying races, and then you had the unfortunate incident before the Copper Basin. So I knew of you going into the Willow 300, and I was fascinated with you. I've always kind of been fascinated with the CVs too, who you were running with, and so I was like, I got to meet that guy.
Yeah. Yeah, I tell you, Mitch Seavey's been, uh, he reminds me a lot of like my parents' generation. He's a firm, hard, stern guy, but he's also got a big heart too, and he's always really been there. I mean, I think it was what 16, 17 years ago. I had just gone through a divorce, and I was trying to decide whether I was going to move to Alaska or not, and he welcomed me up even back then. So we've been in communication off and on ever since then, and pushing for the centennial, pushing for 2025 for my breed. He really created a great opportunity for me there, and I was grateful for it. Unfortunately, like you said, I really just ripped my knee out, like everything that could pinged out
Yeah.
in that accident. And when you saw me, I just I was like, I'm not going back to Maine without a race under my belt coming up here. And Mitch was, he was a little on the fence as to whether or not I'd be able to pull it off. And I didn't even want to go to a doctor until I found out, until I got back home. I didn't even want to know what was wrong with the knee till I got back home. But he trusted me, and of course, trust but verify. He had me take the team out a few times before the Willow to make
Yeah.
sure that I was good to go and all like that. And it was a great experience. So you were on track though to hit the Iditarod last year, right? Is that correct? You were going to do it last year, and then you hit the snag with the.
No, well, I could have done it last year with the new rules. They changed the qualifying rules to where they changed it this year to where you can sign up if you still need one more qualifier, and you just have to complete the qualifier before the food drops.
That's awesome.
But that's a new rule. So it was always kind of, once I got started with Jim, it was always the plan to do this upcoming Iditarod.
Okay.
Um, so when I finished the Copper Basin last year, that kind of checked the final qualifier box.
Yeah, so you are the rookie to watch this year. I looked over your race record, and man, that's pretty impressive. And I think I know why. I mean, I know you played some college football. Um, you know, I I didn't play any high school sports. I was a chess club president. I sang in the choir and played piano, and I knew I was soft, so I decided, I was going to address that. So I joined the Marine Corps, and they helped to, to deal with that. But so the Marine Corps kind of taught me the whole, you know, um, be strong, suck it up, move forward, press forward. But what I never really got, and I just, have been trying to absorb it as much as I can lately, is the competitive side of training. And I'm guessing that your experience as a football player and in college playing football, that kind of thing, athletics, how has that affected uh, your discipline going into training and being competitive? Because you've from day one you've run competitively, even in your Bethel days.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I'd say I'm a rookie to watch. I don't know if I'm the rookie to watch, but and really most of what has enabled me to be competitive is I've happened to be in amazing situations. First with Myron Angstman in Bethel, and now with Jim Lanier in Chugiak. They have some really good dogs. That's the main thing that's allowed me to do it. But I think also, yeah, I'm a very competitive guy. Um, and playing football, I'm not the biggest guy, and I actually played linebacker in college. I
Oh
think
wow.
my playing weight in college was about 210, so
Okay.
I was not big. Um, but yeah, so I kind of learned a lot about just like, yeah, the intent, kind of had to bring the intensity all the time, had to like push forward and overcome obstacles. And mostly, like, I think what a lot of has to do with that is the belief in yourself.
Yeah.
I can do this, I can be competitive, which applies in football, and I think applies to mushing as well.
Yeah, I have three boys that have played football now, and two of them are in the Marine Corps, and one is signing up this year. But I see what football's done for them, and I kind of connected the dots watching them over the last few years, and spending the time that I did with Mitch, just seeing how you properly build a team, and seeing that how you have all of these repetitive baby steps over and over and over again, to build towards success. And so I saw that with Mitch's training strategy, and I saw that with the football teams that my boys have played with, and I was just wondering if you felt like there was a correlation with what you do.
Well, I think part of it that kind of relates to setting up a dog team and setting up a football team is there's this idea of trust, right? Neither of them are individual sports. Yeah, there's only one musher, but as you know, it's a team.
Mhm.
And, in football too, everybody has a job to do. Like if you're on defense, everybody has a specific gap to cover, a specific man to cover. And you not only have to do your job, but you have to trust that the man next to you is going to do their job. And I think that can kind of apply to mushing too. You don't want to try to do too much as a musher, um, but you also don't want to try to do too little. And it's that your dogs are going to do that trusting that your dogs are going to do their job if they've been trained up to do it. And of course, the dogs really have to trust you that you're going to do your job and take care of them and get them down the trail safely. And the other thing, like you said, is it's like baby steps, right? Like in the world of football, you don't. I mean, maybe the NFL guys do, but most teams don't show up on day one and you install the entire offense and defensive package, right? It's a little bit at a time. And so it's the same approach we take to training, like, shorter runs, slowly build on it. Um, when we'll do our first camping trips of the year, it's still short runs, fairly short camps, followed by a short run. And we just continue to build on that and build on that and build on that until
Mhm.
hopefully we're ready to go on race day.
Yeah, that's awesome. For the listeners who don't really know you, and I want to encourage everyone to check out your website. You've got a killer website. Um, but for those who don't know you, you were born in Alaska, but then you moved to the lower 48, West Coast, the lower 48. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself? And particularly, I want to know about your volunteer time with the Jesuit Corps as well.
Yeah, so born in Anchorage, Alaska. We lived in Palmer till I was about 6. So I went to kindergarten in Alaska, and uh, actually at first we moved from there to West Texas. Now, when you live in Alaska, especially when you're a kid, you get instilled in you this like Alaska is so special, Alaska is so special from an early age. So I was not happy when we left. All I've heard is how special this place is. I love it here. Why are we leaving? And I always wanted to come back. And part of the other reason I wanted to come back is I remember when I was in kindergarten, Susan Butcher and Martin Boozer visited my school and gave this
Oh,
whole
sure.
sled dog presentation. And I just thought it was the coolest thing ever. Like, wow, this is so Alaskan. And at that time, it was, Martin at that time was a real up and comer. He was on his way to being a major player. Susan had already won 4 races and was in the middle of the big rivalry with Rick, who was going to win their fifth. I think that year, after I saw Martin and Susan, was when Rick won his fifth Iditarod, out of that famous 91 where he goes through the storm and all that stuff. So anyway, after I left Alaska, I was always like, I am going to come back and I'm going to run the Iditarod season. It took a long time. After a few years in Texas, we moved to Spokane, Washington, where I went to school, went to university, played a couple years of football, uh, blew out my knee, similar to what you did, wrecked about everything that was in my knee, and ended up transferring to Gonzaga University. Graduated from there, and then, like probably happens to a lot of people, I was floundering after college. I had no idea what I wanted to do. Um, and I was kind of trying different jobs and trying to figure it out. And I had a conversation with my dad one day, and he said, "Have you ever thought about the Peace Corps?" I thought that's actually really interesting. That would be really cool. It kind of fits with my values. And then I thought, well, I wonder if the Peace Corps goes to Alaska. I mean, like maybe I could like figure this out to where I also end up back in Alaska. So as I start to explore it, I um, learned a little bit more about this organization with the Jesuit Volunteer Organization, which I had known a little bit about, Gonzaga being a Jesuit institution.
Okay. And so do you have like Catholic roots in your family or?
Yeah, raised Catholic,
Okay.
and
The
uh,
region I live in right now is 94% Catholic.
mm,
Um, I, I'm a sixth generation Tennessean, and the joke, down there, I was actually watching a stand up comedian. He said, where are the Baptists in the room? They raise their hands. Where are the Assembly of God in the room? They raise their hands, and he goes, "Where's the Catholics in the room?" He goes, "No, really, I want to see one. I've never met a Catholic before." So I went from not knowing a Catholic to living in an area where 9 out of 10 of my friends are Catholic now.
yeah.
So I was curious about that.
Well, so I'm actually third generation in my family to graduate from Gonzaga. And not only is that a Jesuit school, it is also the Jesuit retirement community. So whenever any Jesuit on the West Coast retires, they live at Gonzaga
Mhm.
on campus there. So you meet a lot of really interesting old priests in that. So I started to explore that, and I was a little bit late to kind of throwing out my application for that. And in Alaska, there was still positions open in Bethel, and I think there was one in Sitka. And so I jumped at the chance to move out to Bethel, which actually other interesting thing about that is the Jesuit Volunteer Corps. It's a worldwide organization. It started in St. Mary's, Alaska, was the
Okay.
first place. They don't have volunteers there anymore, but the closest place to St. Mary's where there is Jesuit volunteers is Bethel. That was like right where the whole thing started. And we had, I think there was 9 of us volunteers. We all lived in the same house together. We had different positions. I volunteered at a community services foundation, where we not only helped with like grants in the community, but we were working on developing some financial education curriculum for kids and young adults out there.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
And then we also everybody knew about the JVs in Bethel. They'd been there for 30 years, and so you showed up, and it was just like, hey, you need somebody to come volunteer at this community event. Like it was no questions asked. We were there, so it was a really cool experience.
That's awesome.
Um, and while I was there, so of course part of this was, again, I'm trying to come to Alaska. I'm trying to figure out sled dogs, and one day Myron Anksman, um, who was living out there, called the house and said, "Is anybody interested in coming to run sled dogs?" And then from there, I think I was there every single day uh, while I still lived in Bethel.
That's awesome. So I'm going to start referring to you as the Jesuit musher. That's pretty. And the Jesuits, for those who don't understand, the Jesuits are kind of like the Marine Corps of the Catholic priesthood, right? I mean, those guys were hardcore.
Yeah, that's one way to put it for sure.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. So you were not only just baptized into mushing, but you were baptized into competitive mushing like right away, right? I mean, because that was a competitive kennel from day one.
Yeah, so if you don't know much about Myron, he's actually the founder of the Kuskokwim 300 race, and was the president of it for a long time. Actually won it twice, back in the 80s, I think. And so he just, really had a good dog team, and mostly his focus at that time was the Bogus Creek 150, which is kind of the little brother race to the Kuskokwim 300. Back then, they used to run them even on the same weekend. So Myron would run the 150, and then one year I got to run the B team. So Myron took the A team, I took the B team, and so Myron was trying to win it. We were training to win that race, and we did really well in like all of the other kind of local small races. But yeah, it was right into competitive from the first time I started learning about everything.
And how'd you get plugged into with Lanier, with Dr. Lanier, right?
Did it Dr. Linear? Yeah. So it took a while. I was after a few years running with Myron, I kind of just Bethel's an awesome place, but if you don't know, it's not on the road system. You can't drive there. It's about 300 miles ish due west of Anchorage, and there's not a lot out there. Um, so I got to a point where I was like, man, I got to get back on the road system. Um, Moved to Fairbanks for a little while, kind of had my own like small team, kind of dabbled in sprint mushing a little bit. And I kind of just realized like I wasn't making the kind of money to be able to like have a true racing kennel the way I envisioned
Yeah.
it. And I was a stupid young 20-year-old making some questionable decisions, and I realized like, hey, I gotta kind of reset from dog mushing here and focus on building a career. I want to start a family, and so that's what I did. And then I moved down to the Anchorage area, and um, got married to my lovely wife. And every year around Iditarod time, I would just become obsessed, and I'd, follow in the trackers. Then I'd start thinking, well, maybe I could have a dog team. And I'd start doing spreadsheets and how much is this going to cost me and all this stuff. And it just every time, just this is a
Yeah.
financially terrible idea.
Yeah.
Maybe I shouldn't do it. So I'd always talk myself out of it every year. So a few years ago, just kind of same thing happens, and Iditarod starting up, and I look at my wife and I go, "Well, should I do my annual determine that it's way too expensive to have a dog team idea?" And she looks at me and she goes, "Will you just do it? Will you just figure out a way to make it happen? Just figure it out." So I was like, "Well, yeah, I guess we could probably have 4 or 6 dogs." And she goes, "No, no, no. You want to do Iditarod. I know you want to do Iditarod.
Wow.
Figure out how to make that
Well,
happen."
you landed a good one.
She's a good one, yeah. Like, of course, now she can't complain, right? Like,
Oh, yeah.
I'm gone for all the time training. I'd say, "Hey, this was your idea, babe." So I started like trying to figure out what the best way to make that happen is. I knew people had, um, as handlers, run other people's dogs in Iditarod, and
Yeah.
I was kind of trying to figure out how to make that happen and still maintain my current job and still have time to be a husband and father and everything. And so, as it turned out, the closest kennel to where I live was Jim Lanier.
No joke.
And so I started to meet more people in the community and found somebody that I hounded into giving me Jim's phone number. And then I called him up one day and like demanded to meet him, like, "Hey, I'll come over." And just I told him, I basically demanded to scoop poop in his yard. I said, I would like to run dogs. I'm not saying I'll have to. I'll pay my dues. Um, Kind of forced him to take me on, and one thing led to another, and next thing I know, I'm racing the A team for Jim.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's awesome. And another good friend of mine actually just crashed at his house when I was on my heading up to Nome. Um, Larry Dougherty also ran dogs with Jim Lanier for a while, right?
Yeah, he got started with Jim. I think he did his qualifying even with Jim. Larry's a great guy. He did a couple training runs with us last year.
Cool. Yeah, that's super cool. So, tell me, I've always been curious. Tell me about the Northern Whites. Tell me what every Alaskan Husky musher has their secret sauce, and you don't have to give any trade secrets away. But what to you makes and for those who don't know, the Northern Whites are what Jim Lanier's breeding program. His dogs are referred to that. That Mike is running. So tell me about the Northern Whites. What makes them unique to you? What makes them stand out in your mind to other lines of Alaskan Huskies?
Well, I suppose the first and most obvious thing is they're all white, hence the name, the Northern Whites. Most dog teams that you'll see, the black dogs, brown dogs, mixed, occasional white dog here. But I guess the story is 20 some odd years ago, uh, Jim did a breeding and it was a white dog to a white dog. White being a recessive gene, it produced 12 pure white puppies. And so they thought that was really cool and decided from then on they would only breed white dogs to white dogs. Um, Now there's the team that we have now, or the dogs that are kind of in the main team now, um, is kind of a really interesting mix of bloodlines. Some of it goes back to just Jim's old stuff, kind of Jim's original stuff. Then at one point, there's like a Susan Butcher dog that crops up in the pedigree. Um, a lot of dogs came out of a dog that we got from, or that he got from Ray Reddington Jr., and then a couple of dogs from Jeff King. So it's kind of mixed with the stuff Jim's always had, just some really good lines, and Jim's been working at the breeding these animals for 25 years or more. And he's not just looking for white.
Sure.
So I think it's a really remarkable animal. Um, they everybody likes to say that these dogs really have a lot of personality, a lot of intelligence. Um, and yeah, man, they just wanna go, go, go.
Yeah, I think it was Nick Petit was looking at some of my dogs and, said, because I have a lot of, and it's not intentional. I could field a team of pure white Cephalots right now if I wanted to. Um, and Nick Petit made the joke. He said Jim Lanier might be interested in one of your dogs. I think especially some of my females, like, are they build wise, um, are they smaller than average? Are they taller than average? If you compared them to what your competitors are running, like in conformation, what would you say?
I would say that a lot of the males now, especially the young males, are a little bit on the bigger side, slightly bigger side. Um, we do have some rather small females that are just spectacular, but kind of the usual female in Jim's yard is like this really long, rangy type dog, a lot of speed and a lot of intelligence.
Mhm,
Um, and kind of the main group also really well coated and
mm,
suited for travel, which is good, especially because we train in Chugiak where it's generally warmer than anywhere else. So yeah, we kind of have to be a little bit more cognizant of the weather when it is warm in fall training. But hopefully they still kind of maintain that good coat to when it gets cold and we have to race against all those guys from Fairbanks that just live in that stuff, you know.
So, you're running the Iditarod, man. You're there. You're making it happen. How's that feeling?
It's unbelievable. Like I said, I mean, I think I put this idea came into my head when I was, 6 years old, that I was going to do it someday, and multiple stops and starts in trying to make that dream happen. And I'm signed up. It still feels really surreal. It started to feel a little bit more real now that we've started training. Um, more seriously. I'm like, okay, now like I'm every day one step closer, one step closer. And it's just to me, um I'm a big sports guy. I've always been fascinated by competition. I love Alaska, and this is the sport, the competition in Alaska. And on top of that, it's an opportunity to go all the way across the state without having to use a motor, without having any of that stuff, just doing it the old school way. And I feel so connected to Alaska. I feel like it was always calling me back.
Yeah.
So now I have this opportunity to like see so much of it just from the back of a dog team. It's really exciting. I can't wait to get started. Lot of work between now
Oh, yeah.
and the day it starts. A lot of work, but yeah, I'm pretty excited.
That's awesome. I just went for my, registered Maine guide, license, and I had to sit down for over an hour and be interrogated by game wardens on laws and rules and regulations and all that stuff. And um, at the end of it, this old salty game warden, he says, Jonathan, he said, I'd trust you to take me on a overnight dog sled trip in the North Maine woods. And I was like, thank you. And he said, and I'd trust you to take me on a canoe trip, overnight canoe trip down the Allagash. And I was like, thanks. And he said, but you don't like motors, do you? And I was like, no, no, sir, I don't. I'm like, I am not a wrench turner. I was crashing and burning on every question that they were asking me about ATVs, snowmobiles, and all. It's just not my thing. And so yeah, I mean, I'd rather be on a horse than a dirt bike. I'd rather be on a dog sled team than a snowmobile. It's just how I've always been. And strangely, I'm a sixth generation Tennessean, but growing up as a kid, I always said when I grow up, I'm going to move where there's snow. And in the Marine Corps, I just signed up for infantry, but ended up in a cold weather infantry unit. and fell in love with Maine. Was here for just a couple weeks. I didn't do the whole SEER training, but I did 2 weeks of the SEER school here. Fell in love with Maine, and I had in my head that I was going to move back to Tennessee later in life because I'm a sixth generation Tennessean. It's as home to me as Alaska is to you. But uh, at this point, like I've got teenage kids that are in 5 years or so. I've got a couple young adult kids. They're going to be having kids of their own, and my roots are getting pretty grounded here.
Yeah.
In Maine. So, and it's the same. I was in Nome and I was like, man, maybe in another life, this would have been a really cool place to live, but it's just not in the cards for me at this stage in my life. But, you were, we alluded to it before. You were cruising right along with your goals, your mushing goals, and you hit a really big snag last year. A really tragic accident. And instead of me, telling our listeners, would you mind just telling us what happened?
Yeah. So, kind of what had been really the kickoff to racing season for years in Alaska is a race on the Denali Highway, which you say, wait, a race on a highway? Well, it's actually closed down in the winter. Um, so it actually becomes a trail for um, dog teams and snow machines and cross country skiers and whatever kind of winter sport that you want to do. So the race goes basically from where they stop the highway to this lodge, 63 miles. And it's just a one way race. You race the 63 miles and then you come back. So we actually went out there more for training runs. So we were going to do the 63-mile race, and then we hung out for a few days and utilized the highway to do some other training runs. And on on the way back, we the last run we're headed back to the truck. Um, we had a head-on collision with a snow machine, and it was I can't go into like too much details just because it's really hard for me. But basically, uh, we lost three of our main leaders, died in the incident. Um, Another one severely injured, and other dogs also injured, maybe not severely. Um, but yeah, it was really terrible. It was really difficult. Not only were the dogs that we lost the best leaders, but they were some of both to me and Jim and other people involved with the kennel,
And to
just
your wife.
more as yeah, just more as dogs. They
Yeah.
they were some of the most valued like family members.
Yeah.
So it was a really difficult time. It was hard on all of us, and we just we found a way to kind of keep going with the season to try to accomplish our goals, and to try to honor those dogs.
Yeah, I know that had to be hard, and I know that you guys are still. There's only so much you can say, also because you guys are still, in some legal things with the people who hit you. But man, I think anybody who's been mushing dogs for any period of time uh, has had those close calls, and so I've had enough close calls to know that, um, just I've had enough of those close calls to where I can imagine, but I don't know, just how horrible that must have been for you guys. I because you have those mental pictures in your head of, wow, that was literally inches from my team, at whatever 70 miles an hour, and what you could be dealing with. So I really felt horrible for you guys, and was holding Lanier's and your family up in prayer last year. I know that had to be a really tough go. And I mean, the ones that were injured, you have any of them made it back to the team or? Um,
So two of them that were kind of, I guess, what you would call have a minor sled dog injury, or maybe moderate. Kind of got most of the rest of the year off, and they're back in the team for training. Thus far, so good. We're still doing short runs, but they look good. The one dog that got pretty badly injured but made it was this dog named Kit Kat. Um, Now, when I first started going to gyms, I'd bring my daughter along. And so when I started, she was 3. And the very first time we took her there and she met all the dogs, she declared that Kit Kat was her dog. That one belonged to her.
Kids love to
Now,
do
I,
it, don't they? This one
yeah,
is mine.
yeah. Now, I think at first it maybe had something to do with the name. It just
Mm.
appealed to her, but that was her dog. And the more I ran with Jim and I'd tell my daughter about the dogs and the training, it was just always Kit Kat, Kit Kat, Kit Kat. So I knew that one day Kit Kat was going to retire and I was going to make Jim give me that dog
Mhm.
to live at my house. Very special dog. So it made it all the more honestly terrifying that we almost lost her.
Yeah.
Luckily, we were able to race her to vet care. Now, where we were, that was a couple hundred miles away from any vet. We were able to get her to the vet, to get her life saved, and so she's still with us, and she lives at my house now. Um, Now she really truly is my daughter's dog.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. Yeah, here we have these discussions every once in a while. Here in Maine, we have multi-use trails, and cross country skiers, as well as dog sledders, as well as snowmobilers, and the onus is always put on the mushers. It's like,
Yeah,
hey, you guys need to wear more reflective stuff. You need to wear more lights. You need to put more. And at some point, it's like, yeah, I mean, we don't want our dogs to get hurt. We're doing what we can here, but at some point, we need our friends that are on the snowmobiles to acknowledge that. I get it. I love speed too. Speed is fun, but do it in the open fields, do it on the wide open lakes, do it where you can see a mile ahead of you. Don't do it when you're on a snaking trail winding through a stand of spruce trees, and you can't see what's around the next corner. I mean,
yeah,
we all train our dogs to hold to the right side of the trail, but when you're on those little snaky trails going through the woods, and you've got a long string of dogs in front of you, even if the leaders and the point dogs are hugging the right, the dogs behind them are end up cutting the corners. So
yeah. Well, I kind of see that. Yeah, I mean, okay, so as mushers, we have a responsibility to keep ourselves safe, to keep our dogs safe. But if you're doing any other kind of winter sport on those trails, you also have the same responsibility to keep yourself safe. Um, and anyone else that may be with you, riding on a snow machine, being pulled in a trailer. Um, and then, so to me, the next step is then everybody using the trail has a responsibility to help keep each other safe.
mhm.
What can we do as mushers to make sure that we're keeping a cross country skier or somebody ski joring or even somebody on a snow machine safe from harm? It's just that shared social responsibility that I wish I saw more of.
Yeah, yeah, and we call we call them mass holes here in Maine. Um, when 90, I'd say 97% of the snowmobilers out on the trail are great. They see the team. They're on vacation. It's a unique experience. They pull over, they take the photos, and when they do, because I understand that I'm an ambassador for the sport, man, I stop my team. Yeah, sure, you can pet my dogs, and I'll stop and talk to them for a while. There's a little bad part to that, and the bad part is then your dogs learn to want to get pets from every snowmobiler they pass.
They
but uh,
never stop.
but as an ambassador for the sport, I'm like, there are times when I'm like, hey, do you want me to take a picture of you with my dog team? And I'll let them get down there and pose with my dog team and that kind of thing. And that's, I maybe even more, maybe 99% of the experiences. But you've got I'm putting in air quotes, the massholes. You got the guys that, just spent whatever, $20,000 on a snow jet, and they want to, go see how fast it'll go. And they don't really care about your dogs. And they're frustrated that your dogs are on the trail and intentionally fly by your team at breakneck speeds, even, when you're asking them to slow the speed down. And, it's a scary thing. And, in an ideal world, we'd have trails dedicated just to what we do. But man, especially when you're training for distance, it's not like you can groom 100 miles of trail,
Exactly. Yeah, it's yeah, because I mean, I'm sure you would probably feel the same way. Like you would want people to be out enjoying the trails, enjoying the nature. That doesn't mean they have to be a dog musher,
right.
like me or you. Um, and and so it's part of it's part of the reality of the situation. Try to be a good citizen. Try to help people, educate as much as you can, and just try to be safe. And I guess the most you can do is hope that you get that in return. Um, Luckily, for me, one of the huge benefits that we have in training in Chugiak is we actually have a trail system that is dedicated to mushing only, like by municipal ordinance, between August and April, mushing only on our trail system.
That's
And
fantastic.
there's only a couple of ways to enter the trail system, so you're not really going to be able to like sneak on with your snow machine. So that's really cool. It's we don't get a ton of mileage on those trails. I end up doing lots of loops, but it's varied terrain and lots of good hills and lots of turns and stuff like that. Um, so partially because of that, and partially because of what happened, and partially because I had started to have this desire to have some sort of mid-distance style event in Chugiak.
Yeah.
Um,
This was
I
going to
came
be
up.
my next question, actually.
Yeah, I knew where you were going. So
Okay.
I came up with this idea. It's we we have a lot of sprint races on the Chugiak trails, and the parts of the trails that are used for those races, we are really super groomed. Those guys do an amazing job. They're hard and fast and perfect for sprint mushing. And then me and kind of the other distance guys, do a lot of work on kind of the other parts of the trail system so that we can get as much mileage out of it as we can. Well, I got on the board of the Dog Mushers Association there, and I wanted to figure out a way to have a distance style event there. And so basically what I came up with is we do circles. We do small dog teams and we do circles. And then after everything that happened, we decided to actually hold that race in honor of the dogs that we lost.
Yeah.
And we named it after um, this dog, Solo,
Right.
who it's hard for me to talk about Solo. Probably the easiest way to say it is Jim Lanier's been running dogs since the early 70s, and he said Solo was the best leader that
Wow.
he'd ever had, and she
Wow.
was barely 3
Wow.
when he lost her. So already at 3, she was just the
Yeah.
greatest. So we decided to call the race the Solo Sweepstakes,
Yeah.
and it's a pretty unique format. I kind of stole a little bit of the idea from a race they do in Yellowknife called the Underdog 100,
Yeah. Yeah.
where it's a 6 dog mid or long distance event. So we have 6 dogs, and uh, you, last year the trail we were able to use, uh, we had a 17-mile loop. So you do that twice, rest, and then do the loop again. So I think it's a cool way of One, we get people more. Hopefully, we get more people on our trail system in Chugiak. Um, two, it's helping to honor the dogs. It's a trail system that's safe, or about as safe as you can be,
Yeah.
in terms of other trail users. And then hopefully it allows an opportunity for maybe some kennel that they want to race, but they only have so many
Yeah.
dogs, and most distance races you got to have minimum 12 dogs to do it.
Mhm.
So hopefully it affords that opportunity, and hopefully affords an opportunity for maybe handlers of other kennels to get their first crack at racing and camping and that kind of style. So we're going to try to keep it going
Yeah.
for as long as we can.
Yeah. And that's an awesome way to commemorate solo. I think that's great. And I've been in that position. I For most of my 25 years of mushing, I've been a recreational musher, and fielding even a 6 dog 30-mile team at times. I have to borrow a dog here because I've got one out that's whelping a litter, or whatever, doesn't have the miles on it, that kind of thing. So um, it is great to have races like that, so that especially the newer people coming on, the next generation can participate in it. So I, I know that, like, this is a very expensive sport, and you touched on that a little bit. Um, and it also requires a lot of time and effort from you. Being out on the trail training. Um, how have do you have a group of people who are committed to backing you, and, like, how are you making all of this happen? I mean, and it sounds like you've got a very supportive wife, and that's worth its weight in gold right there. But in addition to that, like, how are you making all this happen for yourself?
Well, yeah, the biggest thing is the support of my wife. I mean, especially with um, the little kids that we have at home, and the time that I have to stay away, that she's able to take care of them in the way that they need.
Yeah.
She's also actually not just emotionally, but financially my biggest supporter. She actually runs a small business, as well as her regular job, that she kind of helps out with sponsorship in that way. And then part of the other interesting part of this is one of the only reasons I can pull this off is in a weird roundabout way, the pandemic.
Mm.
Um, so I work for the school district. I'm a technology project manager. And prior to the pandemic,
As a
I
school
was,
teacher, I know how well school districts pay. So
well, as pre-pandemic, I was in the office 5 days a week. Um, and that's a bit of a commute for me. And of course, we did the work from home thing, and they kind of allowed us to do more of a hybrid thing, after everybody started going back to work. So I get to work from home a lot of days, and my house is a lot closer to the kennel than it is to my office. So it saves me time in that way, and I have a lot of flexibility to be able to keep my job and still do the training that I need to do. And then Jim Lanier is obviously a big part of it. Not only is he the owner of the kennel, but you have not seen such a spry 83-year-old man as Jim Lanier. He's out there working every day, feeding dogs, working on various projects in the kennel. So he's a big key to it. His wife Anna is also, super supportive. She's really great with dog care. Always um, has good advice on that kind of stuff. Helps us take care of the dogs. And then there's just other people that over the past couple years have trained with us. Some kind of come and train when they can, just other people kind of helping out. I do most of the training on the race team, um, myself, but it takes a village, and
Sure
there's
does.
a lot of people that really love the Northern Whites and put their heart and soul into it. And lucky for me, those people want to see me succeed with the dog team and make it to know.
That's great. That's great. So looking, I've got just a couple more questions for you. Looking to the Iditarod, which is just around the corner in musher months. um, what excites you the most about what's coming up, and what gives you the most anxiety?
Um, what excites me the most is just to be out there with the dogs. There is I've seen some of that trail, maybe as far as Squentna, but beyond that, it's pretty much going to be all new to me.
Yeah,
Um, and there's the famous kind of some of the famous parts that people say to worry about, the
Bowsville
gorge and the
Gorge, Rainy Falls.
steps and all that stuff. And that gets me excited. I'm like,
Yeah.
yeah, I want to like see what all the fuss
And
is about with all that stuff.
every year those notorious spots are different. I mean, it
Hmm.
depends on some years there's so much snow that they're riding down on fluff, and other years it's rock solid ice. You just never
Yeah.
know from year to year. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm excited for that, but I think most of all is, I'm not the owner of these dogs, but I'm very bonded to them. I see them every day. A lot of them that will probably be on the race team. I harness broke them, and I have run almost every single mile they've ever run
You're
with them.
completely invested in these dogs at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think about once I'm a few or maybe even just a couple days into Iditarod, um, you know, eh, as compared to the mid distance races where you go to a checkpoint and you have your dog truck there and you have your handlers there, you're really out there by yourself on Iditarod. And it just excites me to be like, I get to take however long it takes, somewhere around 2 weeks of just time with nobody else, just me and these animals that I love and adore and am bonded with, and get to experience Alaska in that way. That's probably what excites me the most is to be out there doing that.
Spoken like a true musher. That's the heart of a musher right there. Anything about it giving you anxiety? I mean, for me, like leading up to the expedition I'm doing in January, it's not the being out there on the trail and the dangers there. It's the logistics and the planning and the preparation. Is there anything that keeps you wake up in the middle of the night and are unable to fall back to sleep because your brain starts working on it? That kind of thing.
Sometimes like just all the potential checklists that I already have going to like figure it all out um, a little bit. It's a lot of logistics. Luckily, I have people that are helping me with that, and people that have done Iditarod before and are able to help with that kind of stuff. I think most of if I get anxious about anything, it's sometimes I get a little bit anxious about like the things that you can't control,
Hmm.
right? Like I am really invested in doing this race, and I really want to get to Nome and get the belt buckle and check this thing off of my bucket list. Um, but you know that the dogs have to want to do it and have to
Yeah,
be able to do it too.
yeah,
And sometimes things happen on
yeah,
races that you've done everything right, and for whatever reason, it leads to a scratch.
yeah.
So sometimes I think about things like that, and I try to think about ways in training I can kind of mitigate those risks.
Hmm.
Um, but then ultimately, it's like, hey, you can control what you can control.
That's it.
If something like that happens, that happens. I try to not be too anxious about it, and just keep pushing forward.
Yeah, yeah. Turn the worry about the things you can control into action, and the things that you can't control, just trust that um, worrying about it's not gonna change what could be and should be. And I often say that that worry and anxiety is the worst occupation for an active imagination. And so just like you said, do the things you can do and not sweat the rest. Man, I'm excited to watch you. I'm going to be watching you with my students. Um, Maybe I could get you to zoom in with my students at some point before or after the race. I'm pretty sure that we'll have several. My students get to pick the musher that they want to follow, and I'm sure we're going to have several that will be following you. Tell me how. Uh, and for our listeners, those who don't know, I mean, I've met Mike. I've followed Mike for a while, and what you're hearing is the heart of a true musher here. And I'm just excited for you, man. I'm a big fan of what you're doing, and excited to see you succeed. So, what can our listeners do to support you and to help you reach your goals?
Yeah, so you can check out it's my website is sleddogparker.com. I'm at Sled Dog Parker on social media. And we do on the website have a dog sponsorship program. There's still some dogs that we're looking for sponsorship on. And then, if you wanna be a part of the team, if you believe in what we're doing and want to support, you can find information on my website and contribute in any little or big way possible, I guess.
All right. Well, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get all of that information and make sure it's in the show notes.
Thanks a lot, man. Really happy I got this opportunity to do the podcast. We'll have to get you out on a training run when you get to Alaska before you start the expedition. Maybe I'll show you around Chugi.
Yeah, I'd love that. I'd love that. We are planning on getting into this. I would love to take the whole season up there, but I am a school teacher, and but we do plan to get there about a week early, and we're gonna stretch the dog's legs and maybe break some trail because the villagers are telling us that they don't even travel in late January until the second week of February. They're not even traveling between villages along the Yukon that early in the season. So the first 250 miles are going to be well, I mean, it's all going to be interesting, but those first couple
Yeah,
hundred miles
yeah,
are
for
going to be
sure,
pretty
for
interesting.
sure.
Well, God bless you, brother, and thanks for taking the time. And I look forward to connecting with you soon and getting this up so everybody can check it out.
Right on. Thanks, man.
All right,
Appreciate it.
talk at you later.